in our speaker series. Our guest today is Dr. Yehuda Stolov, Executive Director of Interfaith Encounter Association, based in Jerusalem, which was one of my very exciting destinations as a time during my time as an visiting researcher at Hebrew University, and much more importantly, which is one of the most remarkable inter-communal, interfaith success stories in contemporary Israel and Palestine. So it is, as we were corresponding with Dr. Stolov while we were planning this event, I highlighted two things. It is a story that inspires, and it's a model that is truly a best practice. So we are here today to listen the details and understand the dynamics of that story, which is taking place in a very challenging context, as a matter of fact, and see what points and what inspirations we can get from that. So, Dr. Stolov, thanks for joining us. We look forward to hearing what you have to share with us today, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me. The way we said we will do it is that I will speak, give it an introduction of maybe 10 minutes, maybe a little bit longer. Then Ibrahim, you will present the video, and then we will open up for questions. So you will be leading the conversation to areas that are interesting for you. So let me start. The Interfaith Encounter Association was established more than 18 years ago, which means when the second Intifada was already active, it was clear that governments are limited in their ability to create sustainable peace. And at least in the Holy Land, the Holy Land is very, very small. The distance between the Mediterranean and the Jordan River is something like 60 miles. We live in a neighborhood. We try to look the other way, but we are still very near to each other. Add to that the fact that both Israelis and Palestinians are not famous for doing what they are told. So you need the goodwill of the people if you want to sustain peace in the Holy Land. That was one understanding that we reached, which means also that we cannot rely on the government to do everything. We have, as citizens, the responsibility to take action, to get out of our couches, to stop complaining at the TV, and start doing something. This something that we can do is usually small, but something small, if it goes in the right direction and if it's real, it's infinitely bigger than doing nothing. So this was one understanding. The second understanding was that if we want to take this approach of building peace bottom up, we cannot associate ourselves with this or that political solution, because once we choose one, we alienate everybody else. But if we want to build peace between people, we need everyone to be part of that. And because of that, we decided that we will not have any political views as an organization. We will welcome people from all parts of the political spectrum. We do not ask them to change their views. All we ask them is to engage in conversation with each other. If this is the situation, then we cannot also discuss political issues or narrative issues, because they tend to become people tend to become very emotional about them. So when we were looking for other ways of engaging in a meaningful way, but without this danger of escalation of the conversation, we took something that we already had experience in, which is interfaith dialogue. And we said we will engage in an ongoing way, in a deep way, in an open way, in conversations about our religions, our faith, our cultures, these things that are very dear to us, that lie in the foundations of ourselves. So through that, we get one advantage which is meeting each other in a deep way, in a level that has deep existential value for the people who talk to each other. So we see each other in our depth. Another advantage is that when people engage in this type of conversations, especially if the people who have never met the other before, they discover to their surprise that they have a lot in common with the other. And this is something that is definitely connecting. But maybe more important is the third advantage, which is the fact that in this setting, we are able to discuss differences in a way that is not only not threatening the conversations, but enrich it and make it more interesting. And through that, people train themselves to develop friendships with people they disagree with, which is the real challenge we are facing. We want to convince people to work together for the good of all, despite the differences, and be able not to reach agreement, but to reach friendly disagreements. Um, so this is more or less the approach that we had from the start. Very quickly, we realized that with all the importance of the first exposure to the other, which is the time when one gets rid of most of their prejudices and fears and all of that, it is important to develop relations over time. And we started working with ongoing groups, not with one-time events. The second one-time event that we organized became our first ongoing group that was working for 15 years, a group of women in Jerusalem. And right now, this is the main thing that we do. A group brings together neighbors, so people who live near each other or work in the same place or study in the same place, and usually do not have any meaningful interaction between them. So when we see someone all the time and we don't have the chance to interact with them, we build an image of them that is not very much based in reality. It's we pick this or that here and there, and we build an image. And this image usually tends to be critical and negative. So it kind of supports our prejudices and fears. But when we have the chance to meet with each other, most of them go away. And if we have an ongoing group, then if I'm inspired to meet someone from a community that I never had the chance to meet, it is very hard to do that without a group, because the communities in the Holy Land, even though they live very near to each other, they are very segregated. So I don't have how to, for example, I want to meet, I don't know, a Muslim or a Christian. I cannot just go knock on doors and ask for people to speak with me. Most of the people are too shy to do that. But if there's a group around, then there's a time and place, and I can just join relaxedly. So this is one role that the group plays. The second role is that the group itself develops as a kind of an example that relations of mutual respect and understanding and mutual care and friendship are possible even with the respect for the unique identity of each, without the expectation that all of us will be the same or think the same. So they consolidate as a group, but at the same time, they also present an example for the larger community that this is possible. Because if you just ask random number of people on the street if this is possible between Jews and Muslims and Christians in the Holy Land, probably many will say it's not possible. But if it exists, no one can say it's impossible. The third role of the group is to act as a mechanism of change, because the group focuses on specific communities, and with time, more and more people from these communities go through the process of the group, and the nature of the intercommunal relations in this area will change. Now, in terms of what we already did, until now we established 106 groups in the Holy Land. By the way, we have also a few groups abroad because the model is very easy to implement. I think this is one of its strengths. You don't, the coordinators who take the responsibility for the group do not need to have a lot of training or a lot of knowledge. All they need is the goodwill. And then we have some guidelines that support them in the work. And it happened that right now we have 3 groups that are active outside the Holy Land by people who heard about our work and decided that it can be useful for them as well. So 2 of them are in the United States, one in New Jersey, one in Florida. There's something maybe cooking in the DC area, and one in Kenya. Out of these groups, I would say maybe 40 something, between 40 and 50 groups are active. And I have to say that right now, with this situation that we are in, only about half of the active groups were able to transfer their encounters to become online through Zoom. There are a lot of technical problems, and sometimes people are afraid to be exposed. They don't know who joins, and maybe someone will identify them and so on. So we do have like maybe 20 groups that either already met or are going to meet soon. We organized some special events like the iftar that Ibrahim mentioned before, which was a bit bizarre because usually iftar means that we eat together, but this time we ate together, but each of us in a separate place. So I think this maybe is enough as an introduction, and I will ask Ibrahim to screen the video, and then we'll open up for questions.
Yes, there's a video on your website, and I'll be happy to run it right now. I'll be sharing my screen.
As long as most people alive today can remember, there has never been a lasting peace in the Middle East. For almost 2 decades, the Interfaith Encounter Association has been dedicated to promoting peace in the Middle East through Interfaith Dialogue.
We've got to somehow figure out a way to have 2 populations that are willing to live with each other. And the only way to do that is to get everybody involved. So what we try to do is say that, well, if religion has been part of the problem, then it's got to also be part of the solution.
The IEA maintains dozens of ongoing encounter groups from Malat to Eilat. These include women's groups, religious groups, educators, healthcare professionals, youth, teen, young adults, and many more.
Our aim is, 1, to bring as many as we can of people from different confessions, religions, to sit together in a respectful and peaceful atmosphere to discuss in a peaceful way and a respectful way.
I do this for my kids, my children, not for myself.
And once you get the chance to meet a group, even a small group of 5 or 10 people from the other community, and you have a real conversation with them, this experience changes your the way you relate to the other.
Our vision is of a society in which the otherness of the other is not only accepted, but truly understood and respected.
So thank you for this inspirational video. So and thanks for highlighting the story and its power to give courage to people, its power to transform and build relationship despite the agreement, which is all very precisely summarized in the video, in the vision statement at the end of your video, and also this participant-driven model, which is where I understand, which makes it very sustainable. So I already have several questions in our chat box. So the first one is from Peter Kovac. Yehuda, I've been aware of your work for over a decade now. My lingering question remains. How do you spread the word and draw the new engagers beyond those on both sides that are committed to dialogue? How do you publicize your work in a way that would make people not instinctive engagers to reach out and engage? And that was something I was curious about, and I look forward to what you have to say.
So it divides maybe into two parts. One is actively outreaching to specific communities that we want to include, that we see that we don't have presence there. Usually it starts with identifying one person who is interested. It can be someone who heard about us and approached us and say, you know, I want to do something. They usually don't know what is this something, but then we offer them to coordinate a group, to start a group, to invite their friends. Their friends don't want to join, or at least they don't know that they want to join because they never participated, they never met the other. And they come usually because of curiosity. So they think, you know, there's no point in having a conversation with people from the other side, but it's interesting. I mean, we see them all the time. Let's have a chance to speak with them. And they expect to come once and go, but often they stay. So that's one way. Other ways are trying to spread the word. So we have a quite large email list that we send out updates from the different activities twice a week, and you are all welcome to join. We have a Facebook page that we copy those updates also there. Again, you are welcome to join. And through that, sometimes, I mean, usually I don't know who reads the reports, but often I get like an email or a WhatsApp message or some approach that someone said, you know, I was reading your reports for this and that long. How can I join? Or is it possible to visit? Or things like that. The spreading of the word have like two other ways. One is which is unfortunately very rare. Occasionally we get this or that journalist interested, they write a piece about us, it always brings new people. And the second way is people who are reading the updates, they like something, they send it further. And again, it happened, you know, already many years, so many things happened. One of the things that happened is that people said, you know, I got something about your work from this and that person. Add me to the list, tell me how can I join, or someone, I don't know, in Seattle reading an update and says, you know, I know someone in the north of Israel, why don't you connect with them? So things like that also happen. Mostly, I mean, to sum up in 3 words, word of mouth, mostly.
Thank you. And Chris Matthews asks, there are hundreds of interfaith groups throughout the US that include all of the major world religions. I belong to the Interfaith Council of Washington, D.C. Are you connecting with the interfaith groups that already exist in the US? Also, what are the major barriers to establishing interfaith groups in the Palestine and Israel?
Okay, so in terms of connections, I try to connect with everyone that I know. I know quite many groups. I don't know all of them, of course. And you know, at least we exchange information. Usually the leaders of these groups that I know are on our listserv, where I am on their listservs. We exchange information. We know about each other's work, and we try to collaborate whenever it's possible. So that's for the first question. For the second question, I forgot what it was. Sorry.
What are the major barriers to establishing interfaith groups? Yeah.
Okay. So there are two types of major barriers. The first one is getting the attention of the people, because the thing that we struggle against or work against is not opposition of people. Usually people, when they're offered to meet someone from the other community in a relaxed way without trying to convert their political convictions or religion, usually they will say yes. People are curious. Most of them will try at least once, and then, as I said, many will stay. The problem, the big problem is that most people have never heard about us, even though we work for so long and we are relatively known. The relatively known is still a very, very small part of the whole society. Uh, so, so that's one big challenge that has to do with publicity, with I don't know, getting attention to our work. The second big challenge is the funding. It's very, very challenging for me, at least. Maybe I'm not that good at that, to raise the needed funds. I mean, the budget is very small relatively, but still it's a challenge that takes too much of my time doing it. And I say sometimes it's easier for me to bring together settlers from Hebron and Palestinians from Hebron than to put the cookies on the table.
That well summarizes it. So we have a question from Dr. Aristotes. So
yeah, it's easier to do it verbally than write it out in the chat. So thank you, Yehuda. I realize all of these positive steps are steps as opposed to full-scale solutions that are arrived. So my question recognizes that. But in my last visit to Israel and the West Bank, specifically the West Bank, which was just a few months ago, what I found so upsetting, there are many things I didn't, but what I found upsetting was what seemed to be a very distinct, because the government cannot be entirely excluded, governmental policy to keep the Palestinian and Israeli populations separate to prevent them from having exactly the kind of meetings that you are facilitating. And I'm just wondering, because I assume that the branches that you have established are all throughout what is functionally Israel, as opposed to what might become Palestine, the West Bank, the other side, that is separated from Israel by checkpoints, by walls, so that in all the literal ways, it becomes virtually impossible for Israelis and Palestinians to have any kind of positive intercommunication. Any thoughts on how that can be facilitated? I'm not talking even about Gaza, because I'm not talking about Hamas, but I'm the West Bank and the PA and the Israelis. Any way to do what you're doing in a way that brings more people in from that side of the I'll call it the green line.
Yes. So maybe I should have stressed it before. around 40%, I think, of our groups are groups of Israelis and West Bank Palestinians of different types, different sorts, different places. Many of them meet within the Green Line. So the Palestinians will travel into the Green Line. We will have to organize ahead of time entry permits for Israel, and we do that. I mean, I think the first one started in 2005, which is very quickly after the end of the Second Intifada.
Well, this is thrilling news, because I'm glad you're saying this. I had no idea.
And also, I mean, we even have groups of settlers and Palestinians. As I mentioned before, maybe the most surprising group that we have is the group in Hebron, but they're also in other places, and apparently they're working more or less in the same way. Of course, the government is not, let's say, is not actively helping support the building of the grassroots relations. It never did, because when we had the government that had peace as its policy, they thought that they will do it. They didn't believe so much in the role of the grassroots. So there was something, but very, very small, very marginal. But on the other hand, the government does not try to prevent it. So, you know, it's up to the initiative of the people. When they initiate, the government doesn't put obstacles in front of them. And sometimes you find people there who will actively, I mean, not practically, but at least on the declarative level, will say, well done. And sometimes they will help, not maybe on the national government, but just an example that I remember now. We have a group of rabbis from the Sharon area, which is generally north of Tel Aviv, and they are meeting sheikhs from the area of Nablus. And usually the sheikhs would travel closer to the Sharon, and they would meet somewhere there. And the rabbi said, why you have always to travel to our side? Let's find a way to meet closer to your place. So I said, oh, it's a great idea. I like the fact that people care for each other and they try to, to make an effort to make it easy for the other. But where will they meet? So we thought about a few options that were not good. And then suddenly I remembered that a few years back, I met the head of the Shomron Regional Council, which is a regional council of settlements. And he said that, we have an industrial zone, and if you ever need, I can get you a room in one of these factories or whatever. So I sent him an email. And it's a head of regional council. It's an important person. I got an answer from one of his assistants maybe after half a day. And he immediately connected me with some secretary there that he responded after 1 hour and said, whenever you need, you just say, I will coordinate it for you. So, sometimes you get help and support if you ask for it.
Thank you.
Thanks. The specific question about whether you are in touch with the group Jewish Voice for Peace, is that within your reach, your network?
I don't know them very well, but as far as I know, they are very politically oriented. And usually, maybe, I don't know, maybe this is the reason why I'm not in close touch with them, because groups that are very, very politically oriented don't like so much our approach. Because we do not, for example, we do not commit to the two-state solution or to any other solution, because we want people who oppose the two-state solution also to be engaged in building these bridges between the communities.
Another specific question about the group dynamics that you partly mentioned, but probably asking for a bit more elaboration on that. How do you get through the rough patches to keep the group together?
How do I get through what?
Through the rough patches to keep the group together.
You know, usually once you put politics aside, there's no tensions in the group, hardly any. Occasionally there's something, when there are tensions in the group, they're more on a personal level. Someone said something, the other one was offended, something like that's usually small and solvable. So, I mean, it's quite amazing to see how quickly and how strongly people connect. And, you know, it was even more dramatic when we were meeting during the time of the Intifada. We had back then a project that was funded by the European Commission that was for bringing Israelis and Palestinians for weekend retreats over 3 years. Between 2002 2005, we did 13 of these retreats. And of course, whenever we came, I used to say it was like Alice going into Wonderland, because outside everything was chaotic. People were, there was fighting all the time. People were killed. People were wounded. It was terrible. And then we came into this kind of oasis, and we got to know each other. And at first you saw two very well distinct groups sitting in different tables in the first dinner, which used to happen on Thursday evening. And then you could physically see them coming closer and closer together. And then on Friday evening, we used to have a social evening, the two different forms. Sometimes people, you could see them dancing together, telling jokes with each other, singing together, dancing, whatever. And then farewelling on Saturdays with hugs and exchanging contact information and keeping in touch. So, I, you know, I say that, and this we throughout these 3 years that the Intifada was very much active, there were only 2 occasions that that there was someone throw some political comment, someone responded, and there was a chaos, once for 5 minutes, once for 20 minutes, and you could see everyone else trying to calm it down. And I found myself as an organizer, after 5 or 6 of them, suddenly I realized that I'm not anxious before it starts, because I know it will go well. And yeah, so, and it's in an illustration, I think, of the power of this type of conversations that was later also supported by academic research. Some of the papers are published on our website.
Thank you. My first arrival in Israel was in the summer of 2006, so I remember the moments and the risk of Katyushot or whatever landing on Israeli soil. So I can attest, based on my very specific experience within such context, bringing such group is quite an achievement, and probably that commitment gave people the enough sound judgment and energy and perseverance to resist to those challenging moments during the exchanges.
Yes.
And you have a very participant-driven model. You give a lot of agency to the participants. So you know, in a large number of interfaith encounters, there is a host, and that's most likely an institution or several prominent individuals, and the rest are recipients. They are the participants, and they have, you know, by the design of the idea, they have less agency than what I observed to see in the interfaith encounter model. Can you please elaborate on that? Because I see a lot of strength in that model.
Yes, because the idea is for people to connect naturally. I sometimes say that we organize artificially natural conversation. That's maybe what we are doing. And it's people are not there to be students of someone else. They are not there to be taught or to be educated or to have anything that comes from above. They are there to exchange with each other, and we behind the scenes create the stage or the atmosphere or the safe place for them to be relaxedly and joyfully get to know the other, and they themselves deal with their own prejudices. We don't tell them, you know, you think that they are this or that. No, you are wrong, they are that and this. No, they discover everything themselves and they connect themselves. So we do have coordinators for each group, and the coordinators take the responsibility for the group, but they are not coming from the outside. They are part of the group. They are people from the group who agreed to take the responsibility and be the contact people, tell us what they need us to help them with, or be sometimes raise needs that they have for advice or for coordinating something or that. But the idea is that the whole group is one circle. Everyone is equal, which also sometimes transcend inequalities that are in the outside reality between different communities or different groups or people who are richer or poorer or whatever, or the professor and the student. Once they're in the group, they're the same.
Yeah, and that gives a lot of capacity. That way of learning, despite all it brings, makes what we learn quite strong, rather than having a ready-to-consume model like a text and a guideline, and okay, follow this. Probably this path is, apparently much more challenging, but it's more rewarding as far as we observe your experience.
Yes, I think often if you criticize what people think, they become defensive and they reject your criticism. Or if you tell them you have to be like that, people sometimes they have like automatic this objection to be told what they need to be. But if you say, okay, you don't need to be anything, you don't need to change anything, just come and meet the other. And I have a nice anecdote to share. There was one of our coordinators wanted to invite one of his friends, and he was very, very prejudiced and he didn't want to come. So finally, he convinced him to join, and they were driving up the hill. They were meeting in a place that is on the border between Bejala and a nearby settlement. But when you approach the place, there are a few Palestinian houses. So when he reached these few houses, he stopped the car and turned to this coordinator and told him, give me one reason why I shouldn't turn around and go back home. So this coordinator thought for a minute, and he gave him, I think, a brilliant answer. He said, because if you continue, you can then say that what you think about them is correct. And it convinced him, and he drove the few meters that remained, and he joined the encounter, participated in the encounter, and it's already, I think, 4 years that he's coming regularly to this group.
Okay, thank you. And here's another question from Peter. Do you ever, in your groups, explore inter-spirituality? Either in theory, after all, Judaism and Sunni Islam are in many respects the two closest of the world's great traditions, or in practice, chanted prayer, zikr, or the like? I sense the answer is no, but do you think there may be some potential for this kind of collaborative experience?
So I'm not sure I understood the question. I would say what we have in this respect. We have a lot of sharing. People talk about their spiritual life, their religious life. Some people are spiritual but not religious. They will share their spirituality and so on. Usually there will be very little practice. And if we do have practice, which we occasionally do, is in a way that we have like everyone having praying in their own way or practicing in their own way, and the others are either doing it in parallel or one after the other. And then, for example, if I lead a Jewish prayer, I will start before I start the prayer, I will add a few words of introduction. You know, this is how it's done, and so on, so people will know what's happening. And similarly with the Muslims, with the Christians, and so on. So this is what we do. We don't have interfaith prayers that everyone prays together, and we don't try to experience the prayers of the other. There's one, you know, spiritual practice that occasionally in some groups people do try, which is meditation, because in the Holy Land, meditation is not considered like a practice of a religious or specific religious religion, but something that, you know, an exercise that everyone can do.
Thank you. And here's a heralding question from Chris Matthews. Your work seems to be making progress in the Holy Land. How can we provide donations to support your work? It's a challenging need to do what you are doing there, but critical to the future of the area. So how can people support Interfaith Encounter Association?
Thank you very, very much. This is really, really very much needed. On our website, there are links. It's possible to donate through PayPal. We have a Friends of IEA that is based near Chicago, that if someone needs tax deductibility, we can provide that as well. There are addresses as well to send checks. Everything is on the website.
So I'm just putting a link of IEA into our chat box for those who want to see more details. And you mentioned the IEA going international already in some places and planning in others. So that seems to be a very important threshold. You know, can you inform us a little bit about that?
So we're not changing the focus. We are focused on the Holy Land. There's still a lot of work to do in the Holy Land, but because the model is so easy to implement and so effective, it's very easy to adopt it in other places. Especially that about 2.5 years ago, we got a special grant and we developed together, myself and the coordinators, we developed what we call the coordinators manual that covers all aspects that we could think of group coordination. So anyone who is interested can just connect with us, get this PDF, and do it. So it doesn't require a change of our focus, which is something that I wouldn't want to do right now, because, as I said, there's still a lot of work to do in the Holy Land. The Holy Land have an advantage that it's relatively small. So, you know, the whole of the Holy Land is maybe 11 million people, and there are social studies that say that you can change the society with changing 5 to 10% of them. So we talk about 1 million people. It's something that within the Holy Land reaching 10% is realistic. It will take time, but it can be achieved. While, you know, the whole world is 8 billion people, reaching, you know, 800 million of them is much harder. So we focus on the Holy Land, but we are happy to have these kind of satellite groups, because also we see them as groups that more quickly will help us, support us in things that we need.
Yeah, and prior to this meeting, you were kind enough to inform me about the plan to start an IEA encounter group in DC area, and we truly look forward to being part of that or being an ally of that. So I have one last question about the content. So do you utilize text in the encounters? Is it up to the group, and to what extent the text is a component in the meetings?
So it depends on the group. We provide, within this coordinators manual, there's also a list of 50 potential themes, and maybe 10 of them have texts from the 3 religions. But that's one way. Other groups prefer to do it. So I mean, some groups are very text-based. They will want very much to read the text and explain it and be attached to the text. We have a few of those groups. Other groups prefer to have a more free conversation. So always there will be one from each religion who will present the theme from the perspective of that religion in a very short presentation of 5, 6, 7 minutes, just that people will have a basic idea. And then the conversation is, as I said, like a natural conversation of you bring, I don't know, 10 or 20 people together. They already know each other. They have an interesting theme to discuss. Everyone shares what they think, what they feel, how it is in their tradition or in their home. So many groups will work in a more conversational way.
That was at least my experience in the groups that I attended several times. Well, thanks for this very inspirational, informative, stimulating presentation and exchange. We truly appreciate your time and wish Interfaith Encounter Association, its team and its participants, best of success in their great endeavor. And thank you for your time, Dr. Stolov.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Ibrahim, and Ramadan Kareem to all the Muslims among us.
Thank you.
And hopefully we'll have more chances to connect.
Sure, we will. And I thank all of our participants for their time and great questions. Thank you very much. Kol tov.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.